Welcome to the third tutorial in our Fun with Photoshop. In this tutorial we're going to open some files, make some changes, and save the files in different formats. This means we have to understand a little bit about the different image file formats. File formats are just a standardized method of organizing and storing digital images. Files can be uncompressed, which means all of the original data is left intact. These are very, very large files, such as camera raw files. To make the files a bit smaller and easier to work with, we compress the files. Compression is just a method of cutting the file size. It makes the files easier to work with. We also have to keep in mind resolution, which is the actual number of pixels in a digital image. The higher the resolution, the better the quality is. However, the higher the resolution, the larger the file size. So all of these file formats are ways of dealing with file size and resolution to give you a good image for what you need in a file size that is workable. The different file formats are indicated as dot extensions at the end of the file name. You can see here this is fileformats.jpg for JPEG. The different file formats are bitmaps, EPS files, GIFs, JPEGs, PDFs, PSDs, PNGs, and TIFFs. If you're looking for a large photo file to send to print, you would probably leave it as a TIFF. If you want to make a smaller file that you post on Facebook or email to a friend, a JPEG is a good idea because they can be highly compressed. GIFs are not that good for images, and Photoshop's PSDs are the ones that retain the layers. So those are the ones we're really interested in today. So to start with, we're just going to open a couple of documents. We'll choose Bambi and Flower. And you can see these are both JPEGs, Flower JPEG, Bambi JPEG. Now the first thing we always do is right-click on background and duplicate the layer. And just to make sure we don't get confused, we'll call that Flower. So now we have two layers in the flower image. I would like to get rid of this white background. I want to isolate the flower by itself. So to do that, first I'll show you, if we're going to edit these layers, I've picked the eraser tool, and here I can change the size of the eraser up here. I can also right click when I have it selected and make the eraser larger. So I'm going to erase this petal. But wait, nothing's happening. Or is it? Because we have two identical layers, both of them visible, this icon shows a visibility, we can't really see if we've made changes to this layer because this is a duplicate. So we're just going to make this layer invisible. And there you see the change. Now I'd like to undo that, obviously, so we could either go to Edit, Undo, or Edit, Step Backwards, and you can also see it shows Control-Z, so you can also use the standard Control-Z backup combination on your keyboard. So there we go, now we have just this layer active. To get rid of the background, we'll click on the magic wand, we'll click in the background, and now this white part is the active selection, the part between the dashed lines. So we can go to Edit and Cut, or I can also use Control-X, that's standard cut. And Paste is also the same in Photoshop as it is in other programs. So now we've cut the background. So my flower's pretty good. I'd like to make it smaller, so again we can go to Edit, Free Transform, or use the Control key and Control T. You can see that these shortcuts are always listed in the menu here. So if I go to Free Transform, I have a bounding box with these different handles. I can drag on any of these handles to resize the box. If I want to keep it proportional, I hold down Shift and then drag to resize. Now we're going to go to Bambi, and actually we'll make these separate windows. If you pull down here, you'll have one window there, and then if you click on this file here and pull down, it'll open a separate window so you can see what you're working on. Again, we're going to duplicate Bambi, and we're going to call it Bambi Copy, just to make it easier to work with when we start adding layers and adding files. Now I would like to put a flower behind Bambi's ear. So with the Move tool selected here, we're going to click on the flower. We can move it around in this window anywhere we want. Oh, look at it disappear. But we can also move it and pull it right onto here. And there's the flower appearing on Bambi's head. And you can see now the new layer has been added by doing that. We could also copy it and paste it and do it other methods, but just dragging it is probably the easiest method. Now we want to make sure the flower copy is active. I want to make the flower a little bit better, and I want to tuck it partially behind Bambi's ear. So to make it look realistic, we're going to pretend that this petal here is behind Bambi's ear. So we're going to zoom in on that so we can work on it more easily. Use the hand tool to move around again. And we're going to make this layer, the flower copy, more transparent. So we're going to drag the opacity down here. So now we can see the ear behind the flower. So we'll be able to see what we're doing. We'll go back to the eraser, and again we can adjust it up here. Or we can right click and adjust it and make the eraser a bit smaller. And we're just going to go along the edge of Bambi's ear here. Just right along the edge of where we see the ear, and we're just going to erase the petal that's showing. Quickly like that. Now if we put the opacity back up, now it looks like it's tucked behind Bambi's ear. Now another quick effect to make it look a little bit more realistic, if you double click on this layer, you get all these layer styles available. Again, that's a double left click. We want to put a little drop shadow. That one's a little bit too much, but if you go click beside it here, you have all the options of what to do. You can reduce the intensity. You can also choose where the light's coming from, and this is where Photoshop takes a little bit of an artistic eye. You can see a shadow of the leg here, so obviously the light's coming from the right somewhere. So that's what you want to do. You want to have the light coming roughly from the same angle. You can increase the distance of the shadow. You can increase the spread, the size, all sorts of things. But just a little bit of a shadow makes it look more realistic. And now we'd like to save this. So if I go to Save, File, Save, you see it shows up as a PSD document. As soon as we have a second layer in there, it turned from a JPEG to a PSD. So I want to save this as Bambi 3. I'm going to save it. And this compatibility sign does show up. It's not something you need to be concerned about. You can even select Don't Show Again. But we would also like to save Bambi as a JPEG because that's going to be a smaller file. So if we go to File, Save As, we have a whole choice of different files. There's the bitmaps, the JPEGs, the PNGs, TIFFs, GIFs, everything you want. So we're going to save that as a JPEG. And it warns you here, you're going to lose the layers and you have to save it as a copy. So we're going to save that there. Now, here's another window that comes up where you can decrease or increase the file size. We'll just leave it where it's at. Now you could also, if you wanted to, under layers, you can also merge down, merge visible, and flatten your image to make it one layer. By selecting Save As JPEG, Photoshop is doing that for you. So now if we look at the file size, you can see how large the PSDs are compared to the little 151 and 148 kilobyte files. So if you wanted to send this to somebody or use it in a card, post it anywhere, you would save it as a JPEG, and that makes a very small workable file size. However, you should also save your original PSD Photoshop document with the layers intact in case you ever want to work in it again. So now you can take this flower on your own time, drag it in again a few times and resize it. Put a little one on Bambi's nose. Put some tiny ones on Bambi's toenails. Play a little bit, work a little bit with resizing, try some of the eraser tools, and just get comfortable with using these basic tools. There's a little quiz to do, and then the next step of the tutorial, we're going to be doing another image manipulation. So hopefully you're starting to have fun in Photoshop, and there's more to be had.